We're going to have football to the end of November. I hope you're ready. Because we just getting into it. We getting into the thick of it. Into the thick of it. Yeah, into the thick of it. Into the thick of it. Yeah, into the thick of it. But
Show.
the SEC has 9 teams in the top 25. 4 teams in the top 10. They had more than 4 teams in the top 10, but 4 of them in the top 10 had matchups. The 7th and 11th team in the country and the number 1 and number 5 team in the country. Let me show you the SEC Week 8 scores for this past week, Nate. So Bama, the number 7th ranked team in the country, goes to Rocky Top. Spend my dollar. Parked in a holler neath the mountain moonlight. They go to old Tennessee, number 11th ranked team in the country. And I will tell you what, the defensive matchup, I had this on my phone during the Mississippi State game, tucked underneath so nobody could see it. The defensive matchup of this game, Nate, was insane. 24-17. It looked like we were watching two of the Nick Saban and Les Miles again. It just looked like we were watching some great college football greats. And when I tell you the defense was good, it might have been. It's easily the best defensive matchup this season. It might have been the best defensive matchup I've seen. And so now you have the question of Alabama has 2 losses on the season. One to Vandy and one to Tennessee now. And you're asking yourself, Alabama dropped all the way to 16, I think, 16 in AP poll. With 2 losses, there's still a chance for you to make the playoffs. The SEC stacked. Most competitive conference in college football. You're going to have teams lose more than once. It's just going to happen. So now you have a 12-team format in the playoffs. And you have Bama, who now has 2 losses. Last year you were saying they weren't making the playoffs at all. And now we have to sit here and ask ourselves, is Bama, Alabama, the team that has the most championships from the past 20, 30 years at anybody, are they going to still make the playoffs based on their recent performance?
There's a chance. There's a chance because, again, SEC, we're talking SEC football. SEC football is very competitive, high octane. It's just, yeah. I mean, and Bama beat Georgia.
Yes, and that's the crazy. And we talked about it last week, how confusing it would be if Texas lost to Georgia. And now we saw it. But if we look back, SportsCenter put out a thing where they ranked, or maybe it was SEC, where they gave the percentages of the 5 SEC teams to make the playoffs. It was Texas at 49%. I don't remember those percentage, but these were teams. Texas, Georgia, LSU, A&M, and Tennessee. Bama was not mentioned after that loss. They were not mentioned. So in their eyes, there's not really a chance they make the playoffs. In my eyes, they have already beaten the number 2 team in the country. And this is where the selection committee gets back into the picture. Because now you have a 12-team format. So when you do your rankings at the end of the season, you have to fit teams in that 5 and 11th rank. You got to fit them there. Does Alabama, with 2 losses on the season, might get a third one? Iron Bowl's always close. They play LSU in Death Valley. With Alabama, 2 losses on the season, they beat the number 2 team in the country earlier this season. Do they still make the playoffs?
Yes, they do. They do. Alabama, that's just like there's some teams that are the favorites in the committee. Alabama happens to be one of them. Ohio State is another one. Georgia, Michigan. Um, these are teams that are the committee's favorites and whatnot, and they're going to make the playoffs. Alabama's going to make the playoff. They went out and win decisively and whatnot. They're going to make the playoff. We're going to have maybe 3, 4 teams in the from the SEC that's going to represent the SEC in the college football expanded playoff. You might even have a 2, maybe even 3 loss national championship team.
And you could if those 3 losses were against high-ranked teams. And the competition is just stacked in the SEC. I wouldn't hate if a 3-loss team got into the playoffs with the loss to Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. It wouldn't bother me because those are 3 competitive teams they lost to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing with Penn State. This is in favor of Penn State because they always fall short to Ohio State and Michigan every year. They always have 2 losses that are shoe-in and can never make the playoffs. And now these teams that are always losing to high competition have shots. And so, no, I would not hate it if somebody that lost to high competition. Because you know what? It's hard to beat a team twice. It's very difficult to beat a team twice. When Georgia won the national championship and Alabama won the SEC championship, we saw it then. Couldn't beat a team twice, and it didn't happen. Last year we saw it with Oregon and Washington, but it's very difficult to do it twice. But now we get to the point where the number 5 ranked Georgia Bulldogs goes to Austin, Texas, and plays the Texas Longhorns, the number 1 team in the country. And we have somebody that was at that game. Rob.
Hey, you're petty, Rob. I just want you to know that you're petty.
Petty nothing. That was a heck of a ball game. Until they started throwing stuff.
I don't know if you saw this, Rob, but Georgia had Quinn Ewers at -7 yards in the first half.
Quinn didn't have a clue where he was.
He had 17 yards passing and with a -24 in the sack.
Oh, I know.
So he had -7 yards. They put Arch Manning in to kind of cool him off.
Jalen Walker was eating that boy alive.
Your Georgia Bulldogs are ranked number 2 in the country. Do we see a rematch in the SEC championship?
I think so.
And is it going to be difficult to beat a team twice?
I think Texas was clearly overmatched. When you look at the trenches, Texas is nowhere near the size of Georgia. And Ewers and Manning both didn't have a clue where they were.
3.5 minutes.
No, Arch Manning had that one good run.
Did you see the picture of him on the sidelines?
Arch Manning?
Yeah.
No.
He looked like he was stoned out of his head.
He probably was scared. Yeah. I would have been scared too.
And Ewers, Jalen Walker was eating him alive. With 7 sacks.
Oh, Georgia's defense came to eat. They did not play that game. And I thought it was going to be so much closer. Texas didn't score a point until – did they score a field goal going in the half, or they didn't score anything until
No, it was 23-0 at halftime.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. They didn't score anything the first half. And Georgia, could you say they're a second-half team?
Well, it was the most complete game that we've played the whole year.
Okay. Because I don't want to say Georgia's a second-half team because they do really good in the first quarter, but against Bama, they were definitely a second-half team. Against State, they played really good the first half too. But now I'm thinking, I don't know what to think. Because now you have Bama beating Georgia, Georgia beating Texas, Bama losing this past weekend. And now I'm thinking to myself, what the heck's going to happen?
Well, when it comes to Georgia, we got Florida coming up, which I don't think that's going to be much of a challenge. Ole Miss at Ole Miss.
They just beat Kentucky by 4 touchdowns. Florida did.
Yeah, but it's Florida.
And Georgia did struggle with Kentucky. They only beat them by 1 point.
We haven't lost to Florida in 10 years. Ole Miss at Ole Miss will probably be a pretty good challenge for us. And then following Ole Miss is Tennessee at Athens.
See, that's the game I would be the most concerned about, is the Tennessee game.
I think that'll probably be a pretty challenging game. It depends on which version of Nico, whatever his name is, shows up. Because he's had really good games and really terrible games.
I mean, you're right. It seems like Nico is constantly digressing every game. Yeah. I do not see improvement in his game whatsoever. He started up here week 1, and then he's just slowly going down as the weeks progress. And last week was by far his worst.
If the defense that showed up Saturday night in Austin, Texas shows up, the boy has no chance.
Hey, Nate.
In my opinion.
I mean, if that Georgia defense that showed up against Texas shows up for the rest of the season, Georgia's not going to lose another game.
No, I don't think so.
You know what? That defense right there, I don't know what it was, but Kirby had game planned very, very well against. And the thing we have to acknowledge this: they were on the same Alabama coaching staff, so they know each other very, very well, extremely well. The same thing we could say about Kirby and Lane Kiffin. They know each other extremely well. So again, but if that Georgia defense shows up like how they did for the rest of the season, they're not going to lose another game.
And the other thing, Texas, the whole year has predicated their offense on running the football.
Yes, they did.
What's the one thing they couldn't do?
Couldn't
run the football.
Yep.
And that's the version of Georgia I thought I was going to get before the season started. The hungry. I don't know what you're going to do, Rob. Carson Beck is not good. He's not good.
Between last year and this year, and Kirby even said it after the game, the ability for us to hold on to the football or catch a football is comical. I mean, he was hitting guys in the hands and they couldn't catch it.
Yeah, one of his picks honestly, it was too high of a ball. It was way too high. It was up here. He had to fully extend his entire body to catch it.
Was it Lawson Lucky for a touchdown in the end zone?
Yeah, yes, it was. It was
the
in
one
his
that was
hands.
tipped?
So when you're a receiver and it's in your hands, you got to catch it.
Yeah.
But if I'm gonna play both sides of the coin, it was a really high ball, and the receiver had to extend his whole body to catch it, and he had no power for the ground. Like his feet weren't on the ground. I mean, he had nothing to keep himself stable for catching that ball, and it got tipped and intercepted.
I hate to say this because, NIL is NIL. A lot of the players now, they get their money, they get whatever it is they have, and they check out. Carson Beck has a $400,000 Lamborghini SUV.
Oh, yeah.
He's a senior. He's done. I mean, yeah, he's there. He's doing his thing. But as far as being the guy he was last year, no.
I mean, he was going into the season the Heisman favorite.
Yeah.
And your defense, 23-0, you would think, okay, that's Carson Beck.
But look at the other side of the coin. Quinn Ewers was a Heisman favorite too.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers
had
the quarterback
2 turnovers.
Was bad.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah,
both sides.
It was bad. So if we get that version of Carson Beck, obviously you beat the number 1 team in the country. I get that.
Yeah.
If you have that version of Carson Beck in the playoffs, do you think Georgia can still hold on?
If we have that version of Carson Beck and that defense, nobody's beating us.
Because, I mean, Nate does say defense wins championships, offense just the pretty boys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Georgia did. They beat the number 1 team in the country, and the quarterback play didn't matter.
But I think, and people like to blow up different scenarios and stories or whatever. Texas was so high up on this game and that they could pretty much do no wrong. They forget what Kirby likes to do. Kirby loves to take that fuel and motivate players. And he's the best in the business at doing that.
And he is he played defensive back. So he's a defensive guy, right?
Yeah, he played defensive back for us.
Yeah. So when you got the defense showing up, I mean, you got to thank Kirby for that, right?
Yeah.
But
you got to remember, too, Kirby learned from the best in the business.
But
Nick.
I get that. Yeah, he came from Saban coaching tree, but I do want to point out one thing. Now, there was a penalty that was overturned at the end of the game that they gave to Texas in favor of Texas.
I was sitting right above all that.
Yes. Can you explain to me what happened? And then I'll get to my question. I just want you to explain it because you're right there.
It was a pass interference penalty, which probably, from where I was sitting, didn't really look like it. Probably should not have been called. Was called. The Texas fans went nuts. Started throwing stuff all over the field. Referees met for a solid 5 minutes. Overturned the call. Gave Texas the ball on the 9-yard line. The explanation to Kirby was, well, we called it on the wrong guy. So that's why they overturned the call. Now, Nate can speak to this. That penalty is a judgment call, right? And you can't overturn a judgment call, or you're not supposed to. Is that correct?
You can't overturn a judgment call, but also what I think, and again, this is just because of my time in officiating and so forth, I think they allowed the home team to persuade them to change a call, and that's unacceptable. So that officiating crew is going to be disciplined for that action right there, because basically what it showed was that you allowed the crowd to really, change your mind and so forth for a call that was made. And that's not how that questions the integrity.
And Kirby even said in his post-game press conference, he said, well, I guess we've set a precedent here that if you get mad and throw stuff all over the field, you can get your call changed.
And that's what I was going to point out. Kirby goes in there saying, right after the game, when he's walking off the field, he gets interviewed, and reporters always do. It's probably Holly Rowe or something. I can't remember who it was.
It was, I forget.
I don't think
it was one of the ESPN girls.
It was one of the ESPN girls, yes. And they asked him what he thought about it, and he said he blatantly said that he thinks the officiating could have been better. But I hate that he uses that as, obviously, I didn't know that he got told that it was on a different guy. Now that I know that, I kind of give him a little bit more leeway, because at first glance, I was like, okay, that obviously was not a pass.
But he had to stop short of saying anything because he would get penalized.
Yes, and obviously it wasn't a pass interference. It shouldn't have been called.
And the other thing to note, that white hat owns a business in Dallas. He went to TCU. His son graduated from Texas. So in all reality, he probably shouldn't have been there.
No, probably not. And maybe they need to reevaluate their referee decisions, who they want to officiate games, and put more emphasis on looking up their backgrounds before they choose who's going to officiate. But it was, based on that call, it wasn't a game. Georgia's up 2 possessions.
It didn't do anything to change the outcome of the game or influence the outcome of the game.
No, it didn't. And the fact that it was so heavily discussed, obviously, you look at it and they were throwing trash and all sorts of stuff on the field.
Yeah,
they were getting mad.
Wasn't it beer bottles and cans and stuff like that?
Beer bottles and water bottles.
Stuff they could grab, Nate. Anything they could grab, they were throwing.
That's a bad look. That's a bad look for the game. That's a bad look for the game. And the university. it's a really, really bad look for the university.
Well, supposedly they were fined $250,000, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff that they have to do as far as uh, policing their alcohol sales, this, that, and the other. But $250,000 to Texas oil money—that's nothing.
No, but how far can you go up, really? I mean, Arkansas. We saw Arkansas get fined $250,000 after
Yeah.
they beat Tennessee.
Vanderbilt got $100,000 for
They
brushing
did.
the field on Bama.
And
They got $100,000 for that.
Tennessee just got $100,000 too, didn't they?
Yeah,
Tennessee just got $100,000 for was it the goalpost?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, they got they did that when they beat Bama the first time.
Yeah,
They got in
did.
trouble for the goalpost.
They got in trouble.
Threw that thing in the river.
They
Yeah.
threw it in the river, but that was like 200. Wasn't that like $200,000?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
It was definitely up there. Probably the six-figure amount. I can't remember. Maybe it was a little less. I remember
But
being like
when you
70,000.
when you go to that stadium, you realize how much money that university has. There's a full bar in that stadium.
I wouldn't be surprised if they got a casino chilling in there too.
Well, and there's a drone show at the fourth quarter. It's unreal.
State does drone shows, but I bet it's nothing compared to that.
I mean, it's crazy. And the
Well,
stadium holds over 100,000 people.
that's Texas, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to see what happens. I mean, I know there's bias, of course, and Texas probably gets. I mean, they both get bias, right?
Every team does.
Yeah, and
But, you know,
The
at the beginning of the
overtimes-
season, with Texas being Texas, Texas was this year's media darling that was supposed to win everything. Just like Alabama's been, Georgia's been, you know, Tennessee was in the past. And then for Georgia to roll in there and do what we did, people were freaked out.
No, I mean, because we didn't know when we predicted the college football teams at the beginning of the season. I said that Georgia's going to have the best defense in the country, and they came to eat. That's what I said, and they're going to be undefeated this year and go to the playoffs easy. Because I was thinking I was going to get that version of Georgia's defense that we just got against Texas.
I knew at the beginning of the season, with the way the schedule set up, we wouldn't go through the season undefeated. Because Kirby says it all the time. It's extremely tough to play in the SEC, and going on the road to places like Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, it was going to be impossible to make it through that without at least one loss. Of course, the Alabama game, a lot of that was self-inflicted, but still.
Yes, and that's what's so great about 12-team format. Georgia can go probably lose to Tennessee or another person they have on their schedule, and guess what? They'll probably be perfectly fine and still make the playoffs. But they'll probably just have to play an extra game. Now, if they lose another SEC game, we probably won't see Georgia in the SEC championship.
I don't
so
see
they
that
will
happening.
get that bye.
But let me ask y'all this: does it necessarily matter if they make it to the SEC championship or no?
It would probably be better not to, because then you don't have to play one more game.
Well, that's the thing. That it doesn't matter. It's equal games. You just get a bye week before the playoffs. If you play in the SEC championship and win, you get a bye week going into the playoffs.
So the first,
you get a lock in.
So the top 4 teams get buys,
and that's each of the Power 4 conference winners.
So we're talking about the automatic the bids, like, so basically all conference championships or champions, they automatically get a first buy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then everything else is like, what's the word? Selection, like, just ranking selection.
Well, it would be 5 through 8 host a game. And then,
really?
Yeah, 5, 6, 7, and 8 will host their playoff game.
Okay.
So 9 through 12 would go to 5 to 8.
Would it be a bowl then?
No, they host at their home stadium.
The next
round would be at a bowl.
is the New Year's Six bowls. So then you have 4 New Year's Six bowls, and then the next 2 is the semifinal.
The semis.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, we got some clarity.
The quarters and semis are bowl games.
Okay, got you. Then that's it. I got you. That's what I needed the clarity about.
Yeah.
But if you're the team that loses that SEC championship, then you're gonna have to play an extra game come playoff time.
Yeah.
So now you're gonna have to play one extra game compared to. So is it worth it to? Now you're asking the question: is it worth it to make the SEC championship? Because now you're either gonna play for a bye, or you're gonna have to play an extra game come playoffs. Because if you lose, you gotta play week 1, and you're probably not gonna host.
Yeah.
All of them.
So Rob, is it advantageous for Georgia if they lose a game to try and make the championship, or just?
For us, I don't think it would matter. The way the schedule sets up, I don't think we lose at Ole Miss. And having Tennessee at home, I don't think that's a problem. If it was in Knoxville, big problem.
It's always a close game, though. That's the thing.
No, it's not.
And I have seen Tennessee beat Georgia. I can remember 2 times in the past.
The last 6
10
times
years.
we played them, we beat them by at least 30.
They've won 6 in a row.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute.
The last time they beat us, Joe Cox was the quarterback.
But is this the best Tennessee team we've seen since then?
No.
Or do you think Hendon Hooker's team was better?
Hendon Hooker.
So, but also Georgia probably had a better team that year too. I mean, defense, they definitely did.
Defensively, yeah.
Yes, they definitely did.
Tennessee came into Athens ranked number 1 in the playoff rankings. We were ranked number 1 in the AP rankings, whatever, and blew them out in Athens.
Okay. We're going to see what happens, Rob. We're going to see what happens. I wouldn't take that game lightly based on what we just saw this past week. That's all I'm saying.